Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So Deep Dive for Misty Knight just got released, and we can see all of her abilities and synergies, or almost all of them, but pretty much everything that we saw coincided with that data mine. So that appeared to be pretty much 100% exactly accurate, except this time we actually see the numbers and durations of buffs and things like that. And we have some gameplay footage as well. So I watched the deep dive, I broke it down quite carefully, and I took the more relevant screenshots. And let's take a look at what we think about Misty Knight. Now, keep in mind, obviously, all of this is still a very early impression and by no means some sort of final conclusion of the champion. We still have a lot more to see, and you should not make any kind of judgment calls already based on this deep dive, because we know that numbers are kind of all over the place, and quite often they do not necessarily put the champions in the best spotlight, and in past several deep dives have looked somewhat underwhelming, and the champions have been absolute bangers. So keep all of that in mind, but let's take a look. So as we can see here immediately that basically she does function with the two charges, as we saw in the leaked abilities, anti-metal and cryogenic charges that you will be earning by dexing and parrying and finishing your combos with light or medium, pretty much, or by heavy attacks in certain cases. But for each anti-metal charge, she gains only 3% chance to instantly purify all incoming debuffs, and that is actually quite bad. That is one of the things that I was quite disappointed with. I would have kind of hoped, expected that when she is fully ramped at max 12 charges, she would have like guaranteed chance to shrug off a debuff, but that's not the case. She only has 36% chance at the most to shrug off debuffs in all fights except against Science if she's awakened, because if she's awakened against Science champions, she's capable of shrugging all of them off at certain times. And then cryogenic charge gives her 1% evade, and again, that's nothing that you can use offensively, just going to be a defensive hassle that we kind of have to deal with. Pretty much both of those abilities realistically are just defensive hassles, where she might shrug off your parry and she might evade when you hit her based on how many charges she has. But, you know, offensively, this does pretty much nothing for the character. Now, this is going to be an important clip that I will showcase later, which actually leads me to think she might have somewhat bunkers rotation that was not showcased in this deep dive, but we're gonna get to that in a bit later. Now, she obviously, as I mentioned already in the previous video, has Master of Parry and Dexterity. Basically, even if you do not have Parry Mastery or Dexterity Mastery, she does have them built in. And on top of that, if you do have these Masteries active, she starts with 2 of each of these charges, so you have quicker ramp up initially. And Equilibrium is kind of like the important mechanic for her, where if you level out both of these charges at 3 or more, so if you have 3 anti-metal, 3 cryogenic charges, she gains a precision buff that increases her critical rating for 14 seconds per charge. At 6 charges, she gains the Unblockable for 6 seconds, and that is potentially the most important thing here. So if you have 6 or more charges, whenever she reaches equilibrium, she gains an Unblockable for 6 seconds. And then at 9 or more charges, it's guaranteed critical hits for 6 seconds. Also, all equilibrium buffs are paused during special attacks. You know, that could be useful, but that's not really part of the rotation that I was necessarily thinking for her. And when we're looking at the numbers themselves, again, deep dives are not necessarily the greatest example of these numbers, but they didn't seem all that great in most circumstances. But obviously, we do not know if there are any masteries in play. How does that affect it? Maybe she is potentially compatible with Liquid Courage Double Edge for certain things. We're going to see that, and, you know, it's too early to snub the numbers because they did not look too great in the deep dive, all except one, and that's kind of tricky thing to do. But her signature ability, again, is as was data mine. Basically, you gain an ability based on what class opponent you're fighting against. But the fact that you have to take 27 seconds for that investigation for 18-second uptime of whatever ability you have I don't think it's a very good ability. I don't think it's a very good ability just because you have 40% uptime at best. At SIG 200, all these effects only have 40% uptime in the fight. And that's when she's max SIG. And it's not like these abilities are insanely powerful. Like against skill champions, she can gain Furies if she's bleeding, which, you know, statistically is going to be pretty much never. And against mutants, you gain nothing. Against techs, if you use level 1s, then you can benefit from that. Against Cosmic, you place Disorient. You know, again, not the strongest thing. And against Mystics, you inflict Suppression debuff, which again is not really strong. So I genuinely do think her SIG is pretty much all but useless. Maybe aside from the Science ability, where you can guarantee debuff purification. But if it only has 40% uptime and 20-second wait time at the start of the fight, I'm really not sure whether it's any good at all. Honestly, this is, by the looks of it, initially one of the weakest signature abilities that I have seen. If that wait time would have been like 3 or 5 seconds or something like that, and then you have 18-second uptime, you know, then sure, it's still not an amazing SIG. But if at SIG 200 you have 27 seconds to wait, it's forever to only gain 18-second uptime. So in total, that accounts, again, only for 40% of the fight. You will have these abilities active, and they're far from powerful. So I do think that her signature is kind of useless. But moving on, she is able, obviously, to stack up quite a lot of frost bites in specific circumstances. And if you time your level 1, because level 1 gains you attack increase per anti-metal charge consumed, and then level 2 places the cold snap. So her, let's say, shorter full damage rotation would be you use your level 2 if ideally you are at like full equilibrium, 12 charges of each. So you use your level 2, you place cold snap on the opponent that does X amount of damage over X amount of seconds. And in that meantime, you build up to level 1 and you use your level 1 with 12 charges active, which would give you fairly significant attack bonus during the level 1. So the trick is to use that level 1 when the cold snap would expire and all of those frostbites would detonate, because then that attack increase also transfers to the frostbites and the detonation damage. And then you can detonate for quite a lot of damage. I don't know if you can see that clearly in the screenshot, but it's like 93,000 detonation damage after single level 2. And we can see that this has been like a one full rotation, where basically you have activated one level 2, one level 1, and if you have done it perfectly, you have taken down 54% of Black Bolt, so it's got 250k all in all put together. And if that is without Masteries, you know, that could be quite decent. So I do not want to write off kind of her damage output yet, even though the individual numbers look quite bleak. I think this screenshot kind of quite well showcases that if you do everything correctly, she might actually have fairly decent damage. Now, question how reliably you can pull it off, because it does involve having like a specific timing and specific rotation of level 2, then level 1, and, you know, everything going well, given that opponent, for instance, doesn't stall and throws their special attacks, so on and so forth. But, you know, there is a potential for damage, at the very least, based on this screenshot. Again, I might be wrong on that. This is very early kind of impressions. And then we can take a look at the synergies. She only has like 2 notable synergies. The rest of them are set to be quite generic. Some of them are set to be with an unknown champion. But the synergies that she has is with Elsa Bloodstone, where she can gain busted debuffs and place them on the opponent that increase the cold snap damage by 50%. It's kind of neat. It's not too bad because, you know, you're going to be gaining your cryogenic charges fairly frequently. Every third time you do, you place a busted debuff. So that cold snap damage could, you know, potentially be increased quite decently. But again, it's not one of her main sources of damage. So I'm not sure exactly how effective it's going to be. And again, Elsa Bloodstone, all busted debuffs have their durations increased by 15%. I don't think that's all that powerful. I think she has better versions of this synergy where her all debuffs are increased by duration or the cooldowns are reduced and stuff like that. So I don't think this is like crazy good for Elsa. And then the synergy with Human Torch, which basically lets Misty start with additional 2 charges. So you start with 4 charges of each. And then you would only have to do like 1 parry and 1 dex, and you would already be unblockable. So that could have some potential. And Human Torch get the special 2 stun duration increased. You know, it's kind of neat. It's nothing too crazy, but, you know, better than nothing kind of thing. At least Human Torch is a champion you might actually be using in quests fairly frequently. And that's about it. But there is one thing that kind of keeps me wondering about her. And in order to see that, we're going to have to visit that video, but it wasn't showcased or mentioned at all properly in the deep dive. And we need to take a look at this next segment here, where we can see that whenever you are at 12 charges of each, you have all 3 of these buffs active. So you're unblockable for 6 seconds, precision for like 14 seconds or something, and guaranteed critical for 6 seconds. But the second bit is whenever you would gain any charge, if these buffs are not on cooldown, you refresh them. Additionally, keep in mind her special 3 automatically maxes out all your charges and activates these buffs again and gives you also on top of it energized charge. So my theory is initially that you can pretty much spend almost entire fight unblockable with guaranteed crits. And that could be very, very, very powerful for a ton of content. Because every time you gain a charge, and keep in mind, you gain a charge if you dex, you gain a charge if you parry, you gain a charge if you finish a combo with a light or medium or whatever. So the condition is that you need to do one of those 3 things every 6 seconds, and you're going to keep refreshing and gaining all of these debuffs with guaranteed crits and basically being permanently unblockable. And then the second thing is, you do not want to use your special attacks to get rid of any of your charges, because then you would not refresh them anymore, because you would be out of equilibrium, and your special attacks use these charges. But level 3 doesn't. Level 3 actually would help you work as a failsafe. If you ever lose these buffs and need to regain them immediately, then you activate level 3. So the fight process would be where you get to 12 charges of each, you get all of these benefits, and you just build up to level 3, and you leave that level 3 in your back pocket. Then you try and maintain these buffs up for as long as possible throughout the entire fight. Only time they will actually fall off is when opponent kind of crouches up and refuses to throw their special attack. Because remember, you can still parry a special, you can still dex a special. As long as opponent does anything, you should be able every 6 seconds to refresh this. Whether it is land a combo, you don't even need to land a full combo. You can just, do medium, medium, or medium, light, medium, or anything else, and you're going to stay unblockable. And then if you do happen to have like a mishap where opponent does not cooperate with you, you just activate your level 3, you reactivate all 3 of these buffs, and that's it. You have 50% increased power gain then, and then just keep building to level 3 in case you need to do it again. So I do think that there is quite good potential of Misty Knight kind of being perfect counter for X amount of things, because there are hardly any champions in the game that can kind of be permanently unblockable. And if you do have a champion like that, they often are extremely powerful. Like Nick Fury is one of the very, very few champions in the game that can pretty much spend vast majority of the fight unblockable. Similarly to Aegon once he's ramped up. Now, I'm not saying she's going to be any of those things, but she could be an alternative to that in kind of like a shorter fight, where you're going to get that unblockable relatively easy. Because in theory, you don't even need to land a single hit to become unblockable. Only thing you need to do is parry a bunch of times and dex a bunch of times. And then you go unblockable, and then you can kind of go ham on your opponent. So there is an interesting potential in Misty Knight. And obviously she still has her generic rotation, which we did see with level 2, level 1, and timing, all that stuff. So before this deep dive, I was significantly less interested in Misty Knight. I'm going to be 100% honest. I didn't think she has too much that I would personally be after. But after the deep dive and after realizing that she potentially is a champion that can just stay unblockable with guaranteed crits, I think there's something to look into. So it's going to be very interesting to see more gameplay footage of Misty Knight. And yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the